Chapter 18. Tractor's Law. An old man and woman with a kid my age were sitting around a small fire, warming a pot of something that smelled vile. There were other people camped out in various parts of the ravine as well. After the nasty treatment we'd received from just about everybody since we got here, I chose a spot as far from everyone else as I could. It was on the walkway and gave us a good view of one of the apartment buildings. Wouldn't it be funny if Alice and her father lived in there? I asked Slavko as I spread my coat down on the ground. We sat side by side and watched the people going in and out of the building. Slavko leaned against me, and I put my arm around his shoulder. I had no idea how we were going to get to Ternopil, but right now, I just wanted to go to sleep. But how could we possibly find a place that was safe for the night? The people who went in and out of the apartment buildings looked more prosperous than anyone else we had seen since we got here. They were clean and they looked healthy, and no one shouted at us to leave. I felt my eyes get heavy, and I nearly fell asleep. But then a hand landed on my shoulder, and I jerked awake. "You need to get out of here right now," said an unfamiliar voice behind me. I turned around. It was the kid who had been with the couple cooking something vile. Except the couple was no longer there. "Why?" I asked. "Look over there," he said. Uniformed men were pulling people from the encampment and loading them into the back of a truck. "Come on." He pointed to the buildings at the far end of the complex, farthest from the main road. As we trotted behind the boy, the farmers in the encampment fled. The boy darted down a walkway between two buildings at the back of the complex. I lost sight of him for a moment, but then heard a low whistle. He gestured for us to climb through a main floor window. Once we were inside, the boy closed the window and pulled the curtains. It took a minute or so for my heart to stop pounding and my eyes to adjust to the dimness of the room. The floors were streaked with mud and the walls were cobwebbed, but there was a wooden table with chairs around it, so I sat down on one of them. Slavko and the boy did the same. "Thank you for helping us," I said to the boy. "I'm Neil. This is my brother Slavko." "I'm Ihor," said the boy. "Where did your parents go?" I asked. "Parents?" he asked. "You mean the people with the cookpot? They're no relation. I had fish bones and they had a pot, so we made a deal and shared some fish soup." "How did you get fish bones?" I asked. "The foreign specialists who live in these buildings will sometimes pay you with food scraps if you do jobs for them." "Oh," I said. Another kid mentioned something similar. "How come there's no one living in this flat?" asked Slavko. "There's a lot broken in this flat, and none of the foreigners want to live in it," said Ihor. "I will be sleeping in here tonight. You can too if you want, but we've got to be gone first thing in the morning. The police are constantly trying to clear us out." It wasn't just us and Ihor who slept there that night. It was Ostap and Ruslan as well. Ruslan looked as surprised as I felt when he dropped down through the window. "You've got to stop taking advantage of new people," said Ihor, punching Ruslan in the shoulder. "I saw you try to steal from Neil. The way you act, it's no better than the shock workers." "Look, I'm sorry," said Ruslan, holding out a hand to shake mine. "But when you passed us, I could smell that smoked sallow. It was driving me crazy with hunger." "Here's how it works," said Ihor. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a hunk of black bread. "This goes on the table for us all to share. Now you, Ruslan." Ruslan reached inside his coat sleeve and drew out a raw potato. He set it down on the table. Ostap set down another piece of black bread. All eyes were on me. I looked over to Slavko. He gave a slight nod. I reached into my pocket and drew out our mashed up and dirty package of sallow and set it on the table. "This is my brother's and my contribution," I said. "This is a feast," said Ihor. The apartment didn't have lights or heat, but it did have a water tap. One of the boys found an old empty tin can so we twisted off the lid. The can made a perfect drinking cup, and the lid was useful as a knife to divide up the bread and potato, and we sliced the salad with it too. After we had eaten, the boys told us how they survived day by day at the tractor factory. "The best way to get food is by collecting firewood," said Ruslan. "Why do they need firewood?" I asked. "The apartments have coal furnaces, but there's never enough coal," said Ostap. "So wood is better than nothing." "How can I get identification papers?" asked Slavko. "I want to work in the plant." "Impossible," said Ihor. "Farmers are banned from working here." "But how do they even know where someone is from?" asked Slavko. "Each person is thoroughly investigated before they're hired," said Ihor. "If they pass and they get hired, they're issued an identification card with their photograph on it. They can't get past the guards unless they show that card. Even if someone worked here for a long time but lost their card, they would be out of luck. They'd lose their job." Slavko looked crestfallen at this news. "I really wanted to work at the plant," he said. "Remember, this is Tractor's Law. Nothing works. You would have been disappointed even if you managed to get hired," said Ihor. Slavko and I hung around with the other boys as much as we could, because they knew how to evade the police and also knew the best spots beyond the ravine for gathering firewood. Each night, we'd find a place to sleep, but at the beginning, it was rarely in the same place 2 nights in a row. After a while, Slavko and I settled on sleeping in the communal laundry building. The reason? It was heated, for one thing, and we had as much water as we wanted. But also, it was easy to hide from the police in there. When anyone opened the door, it made a screeching noise, and that gave us plenty of time to hide. Slavko continued selling firewood, but eventually, I got some of the foreign specialists to pay me to do their laundry. I convinced them to pay us a bit extra for staying in the laundry building overnight. One of the engineers was so happy to have me do his laundry that he bribed the police to let us stay there so we could protect his drying laundry from theft. In Falivka, laundry was hand-scrubbed on big wooden racks down by the river in the summer and in a wash tub in the kitchen in the winter. There was no river to wash in at the tractor plant, which was why they needed a laundry building. Inside were wash tubs with scrubbing racks and brushes, rinse tubs, and clotheslines. I would scrub clothing, towels, and sheets on the racks with a bar of soap, then wring each item out by hand, transfer it to the rinse tub to soak while the next load was in the wash tub. It took strength and dexterity to wring the water out of the larger items like bed sheets, and it was awkward hanging them on the line by myself. But word got around that I did a good job. Slavko would pick up the laundry when he delivered his firewood, and he'd deliver the cleaned laundry on his route. We each got paid mostly in small pieces of black bread. I desperately wanted to be paid in money so we could at least travel part of the way to Ternopil by train. But money was scarce, and so was food, so we took what they gave us. We were hungry and cold most of the time, but having access to the laundry meant we stayed cleaner and healthier than just about any of the other farmers. Almost every day, I witnessed someone die. Once, it was a regular factory worker walking back to the barracks after his shift. His knees crumpled, and he fell to the ground, dead. I was shocked that someone who had a salary and a place to live could still starve to death. But the regular workers weren't paid enough to buy much food. They had to rely on the company cafeteria, which, I was told, meant a piece of black bread and maybe a bowl of broth during a 16-hour workday. The specialists were paid far more than that, and as far as I could see, they weren't starving, but they were hungry. Another time, it was a kid who died. He'd just come in from the country, so we had him stay with us that night. But he stayed curled on the floor when the rest of us got up in the morning. His death was so very similar to the way Tato had died that it hit me hard. I comforted myself with the thought that he wasn't alone when he died, and his stomach hadn't been empty. His last night on Earth had been spent with homeless kids just like himself, sharing food and stories and friendship. Trucks came around each evening to pick up the dead bodies. I thought of the pit where they dumped the dead in Filivka since the hunger began. The tractor plant complex was so huge compared to our village, and so many more deaths occurred each day. Were these unfortunates thrown into a garbage pit like Tato had been? I shuddered to think of how big the pit for tractors Loe must be. "We're better off here than we were in Filivka," said Slavko one day, as he helped me soak down shirts. "Why don't we just stay here? Doing hard labor and being paid in moldy bread while people die of starvation around us?" I asked. "What kind of life is that? We need to get to Ternopil." "Like Mama said, we may as well try for the moon," said Slavko. "Getting to Ternopil is just as impossible." "We can do it one step at a time," I said. "Our first step was to get out of Filivka alive. We did that. Next step is to get to Kharkiv. We can find Roman." "What makes you think Roman knows how to get to Ternopil?" asked Slavko. "Maybe he doesn't," I said. "But he can help us survive in Kharkiv until we find that out for ourselves." Slavko didn't respond, but he pounded the next shirt with extra vigor. Finally, he said, "It bothers me that we're right here at the tractor plant, but we can't work in the tractor plant. We haven't even been inside." "You know that it's carefully guarded," I said. "Let's concentrate on getting to Kharkiv in one piece."